Welcome to the Level Up Business Podcast. I am J.R. Lay, and joining me today for a conversation is Audrey, our operations lead here. Today, we are going to unpack the self-limiting beliefs that we often see when helping entrepreneurs publish books through podcast conversations. And Audrey, let me tell you, I'm going to be the first one to step in front of the line and say, I've dealt with these self-limiting beliefs, but you also see them as well through the work that you're doing one-on-one with these entrepreneurs.
The self-limiting beliefs, I mean, that's just part of being human, and that's just part of navigating through life and especially as an entrepreneur. And they're common. They're not unusual, and there's nothing wrong with anybody. And I think it's overcoming these and moving past these self-limiting beliefs that is really something that we feel so passionate about here because, like you said, they've held you back before. They have gotten in the way of you achieving, greatness and really your vision. And so go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you say they've held me back, and I would say yes and no. I would say they more have probably slowed me down than have held me back, because one of the things that I'm observing now is we have two types of narratives. We have two types of stories. We have our internal narrative that comes from our identity, our beliefs, as we're talking about here today, how those beliefs influence our thoughts and our emotional state. But then there's also the external narrative, which is how we show up to the world, that is going to be directly influenced by that internal narrative. So I would say that, yeah, I've done battle with them. And while they haven't stopped me, they definitely have slowed down the progress that I could make. But the more that I'm becoming aware of them, the faster that I'm able to address them and then adopt or rewrite my own story to adopt a new belief, a new identity.
I would definitely, and I appreciate the reframe there. I definitely do believe, and I've seen, yes, from a time perspective, has some of these self-limiting beliefs slowed you down? Absolutely. Have they caused other pain and friction and frustration, outside of time? I know I've seen that some of these internal, and I love that you separated these internal and these external narratives, but these internal narratives are, even though they're inside and they're silent and they're quiet, they are so strong and
Oh, they're
so
so they
powerful.
can be so loud. You're absolutely correct. And Delina and I were having coffee this morning, and I was sharing with her some of the, we'll call it the internal battle that I was having when I was working out, because it was just me, my mind, and my body, which is one of the reasons I believe that you have to master your body to master your mind. They go hand in hand together, and it's like the more that you, will just say, physically move your body, the more that you can work through some of these quote unquote internal battles, internal struggles.
Let's get into some of these self-limiting beliefs because you and I have both spoken to, so many entrepreneurs over the year. And I think what we've found is there is so much wisdom that these entrepreneurs are sitting on, like gold mines of wisdom. And for many of them, they stay quiet.
I wouldn't
They
even say
don't,
they're sitting on it. It's already
or
within.
inside.
Yeah, the opportunity is to unlock that wisdom and then amplify it and share it with the world.
Yes. And there's a couple key comments or beliefs that we have both heard over the years, and we've been able to find patterns between these. And so, what I want to do is go through some of these self limiting beliefs that we hear often that hold entrepreneurs back from taking the step forward to not just identify and surface that wisdom, honor it, but also to unlock it, share it.
Mm.
You had a great conversation not too long ago with an entrepreneur who was really challenging others. If you have this wisdom inside of you, like it is your duty. It is your duty to share it and pass it along because you don't know who needs that.
Mm. Yes, that was with Trav Bell,
Trav,
the bucket list guy, and that was such a good conversation, and I appreciated the call out, the call up there, because you might be listening to this, and I want to just talk to you directly. It's like, maybe you've been thinking about what it took me 7 years to take action on this, but maybe you've been thinking about writing the book. Maybe you've been thinking about starting the podcast. Maybe you've been thinking about uh, getting the keynote and getting on stage and sharing your story, sharing your wisdom because you want to make a bigger impact. But you're not. Like I said, it took me 7 years, and maybe Audrey will talk about this. It took me 7 years to go from having someone tell me, if you want to level up, you're going to have to write the book, to then finally taking action to do so.
When I think if we go back and you look at the timeline that led up to you publishing your book, you said it was 7 years. It took you 7 years. What were those things going through your mind? And then what was the final shift
Yeah. Well,
that led you to then
and you were around, you experienced that going all the way back to 2012 when Delina was giving me the ultimatum at the time. It was the family or the business, and then I brought in some external help from David C. Baker, and was the one who said, I really think now's the time to write a book. This is what's going to take you to the next level. And I can still vividly remember laughing at him. He was sitting across the table from me in the office, and I'm like, and it's so funny because I've heard entrepreneurs tell me the same thing. What do I know? Like, who am I to write this book? The world doesn't need another book. And David was so kind. He goes, "You're gonna write a book." He never gave me the time, but he said, "You're going to write one." And I think he just planted the seed, and it was the idea that took 7 years to finally break through the soil and begin to sprout.
during that 7 years, you had been operating a certain way and doing things a certain way, and then it got to a point where, correct me if I'm wrong, it became painful to be living that same narrative, and it was almost like you had to go and try something else. You had to get
Oh,
the courage to try this whole book thing because what you were doing was no longer sustainable and something had to change.
no, because I knew I wanted to make a bigger impact. It's just me. And, I have a lot of perspective that I had gained, not even just over the 7 years, which was the whole recommendation from David, because at that point I had 10 years of experience. I had 10 years of perspective. Then you compound that with another 7 years. So now it's like I've got 17 years of wisdom that I can share with others to help them to make a bigger impact. But I knew that was, I would say, don't wait until something bad happens to be the catalyst to do the thing, to write the book, to start the podcast, to get on stage and share the keynote. And all of those have been part of my own story. They've been part of my own narrative. But it was in 2019 that I finally made the commitment to write the book. Because and it was, I think that was just the first step. It's making a public commitment because I made that commitment
Good.
on a podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. So from 2012 to 2019, if I could just reflect this back to you, your self-limiting belief or a big self-limiting belief that you were struggling with was, what do I know? The
What do
world
I
doesn't need another book.
Mhm.
I'm just a marketing guy in the
Yeah.
financial space. What value do I have? What were some of those fears? I mean, what were some of those thoughts? Because at that time, look, you were speaking, you were on stages, you were giving keynotes, you were hosting workshops, you were seen as an expert in the
Right.
industry.
I didn't see that within my own self. In hindsight, I could not read the label from outside of the bottle. It was, we'll just call it self-worth issues. I didn't think that I was quote unquote worthy enough to write the book that someone else would read. I didn't, I would say, even value what I had to offer. because it just came so naturally to me. And to your point, I was speaking, I was on stage, I was facilitating workshops. Um, but to put that in a book, it's like I had this gap in my own mind. I perceived published authors on one level, and here's just
Mm.
little old me down here on this other level. Like, who am I to rise to that level?
Right, and I think that's something else that we hear a lot of. It's this title of author,
Mm,
being an author, and I think whether it's subconsciously or not, people like you who might be an expert, who have a lot of wisdom, they can't fathom being considered an author. I'm not a writer. I don't write. That is not me.
you just like once again, you're connecting back to how we started this conversation about the internal narrative and the external narrative, and once again, what makes up the internal narrative? What are the elements? What are the ingredients of the internal narrative? The very first one is identity.
Mhm.
So if you're watching and listening to this saying, as I once did myself, I'm not an author, that's an identity. That's perhaps even deeper than a self-limiting belief. That's an identity upgrade opportunity.
Yep. I just think it takes a little bit of define or redefining what that means. And I know for me, a big light bulb in a very similar way, is a similar way to compare this is the word creative. I'll never forget going through the Colby certification and hearing them reframe what it means to be creative. Because I never thought of myself as a creative person. In my mind, creative, art, artsy, that was design, marketing, and I'm not creative. Well,
Mm.
what does it mean to create? Just to bring something new to life in whatever form that is.
Well, and I guess that's the other thing too, like, the world doesn't need another book. You're 100% correct with that. If that is your belief, the world doesn't need another book. But here's my challenge to you. The world needs your book, especially now, because you're the only one who can deliver what you can deliver. You're the only one who can share what you can share because you're the only one who has lived what you have lived. And the idea of creativity, I think, comes to the maybe it's connected to the idea of publishing a book,
Mhm.
starting a podcast, sharing content, uh, delivering the keynote. The belief might be, well, I have to be creative to do X, Y, or Z. When in reality, to your point on creativity, that is just simply bringing an idea, or in this particular case, the way that we think about it, bringing your wisdom, which is a collection of ideas, insights into the world. So you're not really creating anything new because you have
You're just
already,
sharing.
yeah, you've already lived your life. You've already experienced the the quote unquote the things, and through those experiences, that is what where you have gained your ideas, you have gained your insights, you have gained your wisdom, and now the next step is just to simply open your mouth and set them free.
What about those entrepreneurs, and really this goes for anybody, for that matter, not just entrepreneurs, but, for the sake of our discussion, they may not believe that their wisdom is unique, or I don't have anything to say that hasn't already been said. Um, why would someone read my book when there's hundreds out there saying something very similar? Perhaps for the case of the entrepreneur who may not realize what they have inside of them. They
Ah,
know they have something to share and they feel called to make an impact, but they can't see it. They can't see their own uniqueness.
that was me. Like, I was the same exact way. If we go from 2012 to 2019, when, from the time that someone was like, you're going to write a book, to actually making that commitment publicly, I thought the same thing. Not that unique. Um, But I'll tell you now in hindsight, there's two parts of this. One, um, and this is proverbial wisdom, if you will. There's nothing new under the sun.
Mhm.
Um, it's just what I was mentioning before. What is new is you and the way that you bring that, the way that you share that, the way that you communicate that. Because how you communicate, what you communicate, and maybe even deeper, why you're communicating what you're communicating, i.e., your story that is only yours, that is what's going to connect and resonate then with someone else. So, for
Yeah,
example, I might not, and I know that I don't resonate with everyone, and it's taken me a while to understand and become comfortable with that.
that
But for those that I'm resonating with, and you know who you are, this is why I do what I do.
I think for me, one of the one of the areas I want to get into just a little bit because I think it touches on a lot of these self-limiting beliefs. It's it's this comparison. It's this idea of comparing. I think if we peel back a lot of the beliefs that we're hearing, some of the and maybe it's not a fear, but I see a common pattern. It's we're comparing ourselves to others. And I
Ah,
think that can be such a tremendous roadblock isn't the right word.
it's an obstacle. That's all it
Obs-
is. It's an obstacle, and every obstacle I do believe is an opportunity, and it's an opportunity to level up yourself. And to your point on comparison, if I go from that 7 year period, I was subconsciously comparing myself to others.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's there's like different layers to this because it might present as what do I know, but maybe deeper. I'm not as smart, or I don't have as much experience, or I don't have as big of a following as so and so has. Well, comparison is the thief of joy, number
Yep.
one. Number two, comparison, if there's nothing to compare ourselves against because there's no one else but you. There's no one else but me. And it is that uniqueness that we all bring. I think that is what we should focus and hone in on. And I will tell you, and maybe I've never shared this before publicly, but I think as an entrepreneur, a lot of my comparison has been very personal to my father-in-law, um, because he
Yeah.
has lived the American dream, and I felt like I had to have that same type of story, that same type of a journey. And it's only been within the last couple of years I realized that that was a falsehood. And in fact, that was something that was keeping me back from going down the path that I needed to go down. So yeah, comparison is something that will definitely keep you stuck.
Yeah, I think just the fear of being compared or this isn't gonna be good enough or what if it's criticized or what if I'm called out?
Oh,
What if people think I'm an idiot now?
have you,
I think there's a lot I think you got to go through this level of internal work and really building up this level of confidence and truly authentically not caring.
there's the comparison that I was talking about, but I think the way that you're framing this too, it's a fear of judgment. It's what are they going to think of me? Am I going to be found out? Am I going to be compared to someone else? And you're 100% correct. Who cares? Like, really? I remember I was talking to a bunch of seventh and eighth graders recently at a career day about entrepreneurship and specifically on the topic of public speaking, and how when we have the courage to use our voice, to share, to speak up, we really can make an even bigger impact. And what I was noticing with these seventh and eighth graders is no one wanted to raise their hand. No one wanted to speak up. So I had a bunch of these seventh and eighth graders come up to the front of class, and I was like, I want you to stand here for just stand here for 30 seconds. 30 seconds came, and then I pushed it a little bit longer. I was like, okay, 60 seconds. And I was like, how do you feel for these 4 or 5 at the front of the class? And they were like, I feel very uncomfortable. I said, why? They weren't saying anything. They were just having to stand there because all eyes were on them, is what they said. Because I feel like everyone's looking at me. So then I flipped it around and I asked the rest of the class, for those 60 seconds, what were you thinking about? And people would raise their hands. We're starting to get everyone comfortable to have a conversation. People would raise their hands. I was thinking about what I'm going to do later today. I was thinking about my homework. I was thinking about the game tonight. So I pretty much just made a blanket statement for this class. So you weren't thinking about any of the 5 people that were standing up here?
Mhm.
No. And to my friends at the front of the class now, the 4 or 5 people standing up at the front of the class, I said, you see, they're all thinking about themselves more than they're thinking about you. So your point on comparison, we have this internal perspective. We also have the external. Really, you can sum it up with the fear of judgment. But at the end of the day, no one's really thinking about us.
I know. I mean, and that's something I it's a constant work in progress. I think a lot of these beliefs and these identity beliefs, it's not something that goes away overnight. I mean, it takes practice to work through these and reframe and imprint a new beliefs and new identity. And I think one of the things that, and perhaps another belief, somewhat on the comparison side,
Real
it's
fast before we go there, I don't know if you realize what you just said, but I think this is a great distinction. Is you reframed what we have been talking about as self-limiting beliefs. You said their identity beliefs. And I think that's an important distinction because a self-limiting belief is obviously going to keep us stuck. It's going to limit our potential, but maybe it's not just a self-limiting belief. Maybe it is truly an identity belief because identity is going to inform the beliefs that we have.
I think it really comes down to identity and who you truly believe you are. And these are things that are so subconscious that without a constant and um, intentional practice, that's why it's so challenging. I mean, it's so challenging to make changes long term if you don't do that deep work first. But I feel like and I know this is something that I've thought about because I do have plans to write a book and not just one book, but I have many thoughts in my head, but it's being true to myself and realizing that I don't have to know it all. I don't have to be an expert. If I put out this book, let's go back to your first book. If I put out this book that I am the marketing expert in baking, but I don't know it all, and then I get called out. I think we almost assume this identity to fit this uh, persona of
Mhm.
ours, and I think when you become an author, perhaps there's a little bit of persona attached to it, and so how to keep things real and detach. Does that make sense? I'm trying to find the words to
Well, yeah,
articulate.
it's kind of like, for example, if I think about me running marathons, um, I didn't become a marathon runner like I did 5K, then I did the 10K. But really it was becoming it was I knew that to run a marathon, I had to believe that I was a marathon runner. Like so there was an identity attachment to that. To become a keynote speaker, I knew I had to have the identity that I am a keynote speaker. To become an entrepreneur, I knew I had to have the identity that I am an entrepreneur. So it's like there is an identity that is going to influence the belief. And to your point, all of this is subconscious, which I think would be a great conversation to have because 95% of our behavior runs at a subconscious level that we're not even consciously aware of. And I think about a belief of an entrepreneur that we're about to kick off a book, and their belief was, I'm going to have to type this thing out myself, which is the whole reason that we're working together with them, because I said, can you talk? Can you have a conversation? They said, yeah. I go, well, we could just publish your book through podcast conversations that become your manuscript. He goes, we could do that? I said, absolutely. So his belief was, I'm going to have to write this in the dark of night,
Which
and
goes
then
back to I'm not an author.
correct. And then it was, I'm not that good of a writer was another one that I think was starting to come up. So that you're right. It's identity beliefs and perhaps not just self-limiting beliefs.
Right. I think it's a reframe. It's a perspective reframe. One of the other ones we hear is I don't have an audience. Who's going to read this book? Who's going to buy my book? Or I don't have an audience, but also, and this is one that I personally struggle with, I don't want to assume the role of this influencer. I'm not trying to be an influencer. I don't want to put myself out there as if I'm trying to show off, because that can be off-putting for some. And we see people out there. There's a lot of gurus out there who are starting to get exposed, for lack of better words. There's that fear as well.
When I made the commitment to write my first book, I might have had like 2,000 connections on LinkedIn, a couple thousand people from an email database that I had collected over years. But I believed that if I could make a positive impact just for the people that I knew, everything else would take care of itself. And then it's like, well, what comes first? Is it the building the audience, or is it sharing the wisdom? I believe it's sharing the wisdom, and that's what builds the audience. And
So,
maybe not even audience, maybe it's more of a community. Because if you're really concerned on the influencer side, and I'm right there with you, I don't want to be an influencer. But
mhm,
but to make an impact, you're going to have to influence.
right.
Um, to influence people, you're going to have to share your wisdom and your story. And the more that you share, the more vulnerable that you are, to share the truth that you have, the more likely you're to resonate with them, which comes back to something that we were talking about before. So as we're talking through this, all of these elements are truly intersected like a quilt. It's they're all sewn together with a common thread, which all comes down to the internal narrative, the internal story that you're telling yourself about yourself.
So as we start to wrap up here, we've tackled quite a bit of, I mean, we're talking beliefs, self-limiting beliefs, identity changes, and just talking through some of the patterns that we hear that are holding so many entrepreneurs back from sharing their wisdom. What can someone do who's listening? Perhaps they have a book on the radar, or they're just now thinking about it, but a lot of this is resonating with them. They're thinking, "Yep, that sounds like me. I felt that." What can they do to move forward and work through some of these beliefs and identity questions they may be feeling?
I mean, this is what we do to help visionary entrepreneurs publish books through podcast conversations. But if you're not there just yet, I think it would be sitting down and doing an inventory of all the wisdom that you have to begin with in the first place. Get it out of your head, get it on paper. And I'm not even talking
Your
about,
experiences,
yes.
lessons in life, what you're passionate about.
You know what? I think that's what we'll do. Let's talk through that on a future podcast conversations, because we do have specific frameworks that we guide entrepreneurs through to help them see what they can't see. It's almost like we help them step outside of the bottle that they're in and begin to read the label from the outside. And in the meantime, though, I would say pen and paper, and it's like, what are the top 10 things that you know that no one else knows? And I would say, as your coach, I'm going to tell you, drop and give me 20. Don't just do 10. Give me 20 things that you know that no one else knows, and you only know them because it is your experience, it is your wisdom.
That's good. Thank you. We're gonna have to get into more because we could go on and on and on.
Yes, we can. Thank you so much,
Great.
Audrey. We
Yep.
look forward to hanging out with you who are been watching and listening on the next podcast. Hey, it's JR. Before we wrap up, I have one more question for you. Are you a visionary entrepreneur who wants to elevate your brand and expand your influence to increase your impact? If this is you, you're the reason we're on a mission to amplify the voices of visionary entrepreneurs by unlocking their wisdom, sharing their stories, and publishing their books. So, when you are ready to level up your business and your life, send me a text to 832-240-1922. That's because I want to teach you to amplify your voice so that your mission and message are seen, known, and heard by those who need your help the most.